Identity. Interesting. Why would we talk about identity? Well, I think discovering who we are is something all of us go through. And you see it in our culture. There's so many movies. There's tons of stuff out there in media. People searching for themselves, trying to find themselves. I guess that's the lingo of our culture. And also like very funny, comedies about that, like Who Am I? And some, I'm thinking of a few funny movies. But just people in general, we want to know who we are at some point. And maybe if you're grade 7, maybe even 8, you really haven't thought about that too much. Maybe you have. But as you get older, you start wondering this question, who am I? And so today's talk is entitled, Who Decides Who You Are? Now, it's an interesting question, but we're going to actually delve into it even more next week. Today, I just kind of on the surface, we're going to ask a few questions and talk about it, but who gets to decide who you are? It's for me, that's intriguing. So how in the world can you discover who you really are? Not who you think you are, not who others think you are, but who you really are. So that's one of the questions. Another question is, what does God have to say about your identity? So this is the one thing we'll always get into when we're at youth is, well, what does God say about these things? So whether we're going through a book of the Bible or whether we're tackling a topic like identity, what does God say about it? And then, what does our culture say about it? What is specifically, let's go with Canadian or maybe North American culture. How does our culture kind of define us? Or what's their methods of trying to get you or help you discover who you are? And then finally, why is this important for those who follow Jesus? Why is understanding and knowing who you are so important? Because it is. I'll tell you right now. That's why this whole series is that's kind of the basis of this whole thing. Is so important, and so I feel lots of tension, I guess you could call it, because I so desperately want you guys to understand how God sees you, and I think that's so important. Now, here's the tricky part. Identity is a key area of attack. I think this is one of the main places that our enemy, Satan, wants to attack us in. And so here's the deal. Like, your faith and your identity are inseparable. And the enemy wants to separate them. That's one of his goals. He wants to separate who you really are and from your faith. Because if he can divide those things, then he's got some room to play with. And so part of the reason we want to do this series is because we want to be prepared for that. You guys are going to experience this all day long. In fact, if you watch TV, if you go to school, if you live and breathe, you are experiencing lies from our culture that aren't really from our culture. They're actually from the enemy, and they come to us from our culture about who you are and how to determine who you are constantly. And so we want to balance that out a little bit with some truth here over the next 5 weeks. And so I'm really excited about it. I hope you guys tune in and come. And if you miss, we're going to put these things online so that you can catch up. But I just think this is such an important area for us to understand. And I think if I could boil it down to 2 main areas where I think the enemy is concentrating his attack. The first would be lies about who God is. He does not want you to understand who our God is. He does not want you to understand this amazing God who is full of love and compassion for people, who would give up his own son, his own life, to save us. The enemy does not want you to believe in that kind of God. So he is going to put all sorts of lies in our minds through all sorts of different mediums in order to fool us into thinking God is something or someone that he isn't. And so the lies that we encounter in our world are meant to erode our actual belief or who God really is. And here's kind of the two I would say, prongs of this attack, is that first of all, that God isn't good. At the very least, that he's not good enough. And secondly, that he isn't able. So even if you believe one, he wants to get you with the other. Because if you believe that God is good, okay, but is he able? Can he really do that? I think, and we're going to explore those things throughout this series. So those are the two main, and there's lots of different areas, but we're just going to kind of hone in on these two things. Is God good enough? So I think that's a constant lie that we experience all day long. And is God able? I mean, we experience this all the time. As soon as we get in a tough situation, doubt, what's going to happen? Anxiety, anxiousness. Is God going to come through? It's this constant lie that's being pushed at us that God isn't able. Well, the second area is who you are. So we're going to explore both of these areas because we can't really get to who we are if we don't understand who God is. And so who you are is the other area of attack. And the enemy, you need to understand this. The enemy only has power over the believer if we believe his lies. That's the only power he has. That's it. And if you remember our kingdom series and our second talk, we talked about the dragon, the king and the dragon, and the epic fight, and how Satan, who was represented as a dragon in that text, was cast down to earth, and now with fury is honing his attack on the children of God. And so this is one of the key main areas that he wants to attack us in, who you really are. And he wants to give you all sorts of different versions of who you are. He doesn't want you to know and understand and believe who God says you are. And here it boils down to this again. You're not enough. Now here's the tricky part about this lie. It's partly true. You aren't enough. But if you don't fall into the first trap of believing that God's not enough, then you're less likely to fall into the second trap. Because even if you're not enough, God is. And you're one of his kids if you are a follower of Jesus. See how these things are linked? You know, Satan, he's very smart. He's been doing this for thousands of years. And so he's got his craft honed. And so we need to combat these lies with truth. And you're not enough will come in all different forms. Where you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough, you don't have enough, you aren't enough, you aren't enough. It's constant. And here's how this lie comes at you. It's always, you're not. It's an accusation. Because if, again, going back to our kingdom series, that's one of the enemy's tactics, accusation. All right, so those are the key areas of attack. So here's the question that we're going to follow this up, or a bunch of questions, I guess. Identity, okay, so how do you discover who you really are? How do you get there? How do we really know? How do you know who you are? Is it by how you feel? If you feel a certain way, is that how you define yourself? Our culture seems to think so. Or how about what your desires are? How strong your desires are? You start defining yourself by these desires. And it could be for all sorts of things, and we're gonna delve into that as well. How about skills and talents? Are you skilled in certain areas, and you just kind of yeah, that's who I am. I'm one of the smart people, or right, or I'm a jock, or I'm a nerd and I love it because I'm going to make millions of dollars and I'm going to show those jocks. Or how about how others perceive you? Is that how you discover who you are? Is how other people view you? Friends? Even parents? Relatives? Teachers? Youth leaders? Youth pastor? Like, do those people get to define you? Are they putting labels on you? You're labeled for a certain thing and you just kind of go with it? Or image? Are you trying to portray an image of someone that maybe you're not? Or appearance? Right? You're trying to project a certain appearance? How about this one? Are you defined by your mistakes? I know lots of people struggle with this. Make a huge error and that's what people know you for? I mean, I'm thinking of, so let's just go to hockey, for instance. I'm an Oiler fan. And back in the 80s, Oilers had a big Stanley Cup run year after year. And in 1985, a guy named Steve Smith scored on himself in Game 7 against the Calgary Flames, which ended up putting a little blemish in the Oiler run of many cups because they ended up losing the series. And he was forever known. And for years, he'd go to basically the Calgary, and they would chant, "Shoot, shoot." And he was defined by that. That became his label. Or even successes, right? Are you defined by your successes? Is that who you are? Is that how you find out who you are, what you're successful in or what you're good at? How about your intelligence? How smart you are? How good your grades are? What you can do with your brain? Is that what defines you? How about how popular you are? Again, this is kind of how others perceive you, right? Status. Oh, everyone wants to be like me, or everybody wants to be me. Or on the flip side of it, you're looking at others going like, oh, I wish I was that person. I wish I was this person. That's all identity stuff. How about what culture, ethnicity, nationality you are? Does that determine who you are? Is that how you discover who you really are? How about wealth? Rich, poor? Or how wealthy or poor you think you are? Does that define you? Now here's the interesting part. All of these things actually do play a part in who you are, right? Can't just say, no, they don't do it at anything. They do play a part, but here is where the enemy gets his traction. Is he wants you to take one of these things, or another one that you might have, and elevate it to the primary identity, and for you to say, if I lose that, I don't know who I am. That's what he wants. He wants you to elevate these things to a spot they shouldn't be. That's when the lies can start to work. And so here's these two questions, and then we'll watch the video. Who gets to decide who you are? Re-asking this question. Right? We've talked about all these little things, but in the end, who gets to decide? Is it you? Is it our culture? Is it other people? Because none of us are self-made. We are influenced from little tiny baby, right? In the home you grew up in the country you grew up in northern Alberta that you grew up in. That's shaped you. So who gets to decide who you are? And finally, the last question that I think hopefully under these two questions actually underscore this whole series. In the end, who are you going to believe? Who are you going to believe? Because you are being told what your identity is and how to find it in all sorts of different manners, and most of them are lies. So for this 5 weeks, we just want to center on some truth. But in the end, you have to decide, who am I going to believe? And I'm not asking you to believe me. Like, I hope it has some weight for you, but it's not even about believing me. Who are you going to believe? Because God says a whole lot about who we are. All right, let me set up the talk here. The video, sorry. So in this video, it's really cool. I've used it a few times in years gone by. It's quite powerful because there's two things. One, Eric Mason is a great speaker. And two, it's interspersed with some teen testimony about what he's talking about. So I'm excited for you guys to hear this stuff and watch and hear what he has to say. I think it's quite powerful. And for this first kind of part, he's talking about image. And I think image is one of those things, if you haven't thought about it, you'll be starting to think about it after this talk.